Good morning, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining our webinar, The New Normal, Remote Working, Doing It Right with our partners at VMware. My name is Michelle and I'm part of the marketing team here at DDLS, and I'll be the moderator for today's session. Before we begin, I'd like to quickly run through some housekeeping. This webinar is in listen mode only and will be recorded and distributed to all attendees at a later date. The webinar will run for approximately 45 minutes. If you have any questions, please type them into the question box on the control panel and we'll do our best to address them all. Today, I am pleased to be joined by our guest speakers at VMware, Shane Fowler and Leksono, who are both digital workplace specialists. I'd now like to hand it over to Bo.
Thanks for that. All right, so I think what we want to talk about today is the new normal. Now, back in March, our CEO pretty much came out with a statement saying that when the pandemic hits, he said that the pandemic is a major event that will permanently change the way we work, and that holds true in that sense that we're seeing different companies adapting to the situation in different ways. Obviously, us here down under pretty much embrace the work from home change for the companies that can actually deploy those types of work style. But the thing to remember here is that the work from home is not really something that that is applied to handle the pandemic and then it will go away. It's just that when we are back to a normal state, I think the way we work would have changed dramatically, and the way we work will permanently change. And now, to get an understanding what is the new normal on that front, we need to understand what are the personas, what kind of personas we're talking about from a worker perspective now, and how it's changed. So I think the first one is essentially 100% remote employees. So these are employees that can work 100% not in the office. They can pretty much log in from anywhere they want. But on that front, what kind of changes that will happen here? I think from Twitter perspective, there is no expectation for them to come back to work. So Twitter gave an option to all of their employees to never come back to work. They can actually work remotely. Now, sadly, not every company can actually do this, right? So there are going to be frontline workers that require them to come back to the office. Manufacturing, for example, that needs that. So from that perspective, though, what kind of things we need to think about? So this is obviously we need to adapt to the new ways of doing things. So from that perspective, when they do come back to work, what are the things that needs to be taken into account? Of things like, social distancing, if you have a lift, how many can actually go into those lifts? Those types of things needs to be taken into account. And then obviously there's the hybrid employee, the employee that comes to work sometimes and then goes and can work remotely. And at VMware, we're pretty much one of these companies. Now, just to give you an idea what kind of changes we are expecting here is that before the pandemic hit, we already have a work from home culture. From a VMware perspective, we already have around 10% of our employees working constantly from home. And I think from a planning perspective, we are expecting after we finish and hit the new normal, I think that will actually go to around the 50 to 60% mark. So going from a 10%, all of the employees working from home, the option of actually having the ability to work from home, to a 50 to 60. So how can you adapt? And that is essentially the things that we want to talk today is how do we adapt to those types of change? Because those are big changes. And the old ways of doing things aren't going to stack up, and we'll explain to you why that is the case. Now, if we're talking about the phases of what we're going through at the moment, or what the world is going through at the moment, is that we can classify it into three main things. The first one is the response phase, and we'll go through of these phases really in greater detail in the next few slides. But from what we're seeing out there is that there's three responses. So essentially, the response phase, this is, I need to get something on, I need to get something implemented so that we can still continue doing our work. So the business can continue. So that's the response phase. The phase that we're in at this point in time, we're in the reflect phase. We're kind of already finished on that hump. We've got users working from home, but then we are in this phase where let's have a look at what we've done and let's see if that is sustainable in the future or moving forward. Because as time progressed, what was deployed as a tactical solution might not be sustainable in the future. So, so that's what we want to dive into, to make sure that we use this phase that we are on at the moment to plan ahead and build the correct foundation, so that in the future we are in a better position to prepare ourselves for the new normal. And this is where the rethink is going to be. So again, three phases: the response phase. So obviously there's the pre-pandemic, but there's the response phase, the reflect, where we are now, which is why we are here today, to talk about what are the things we need to think about, lay the correct foundation so that we can get to this, we can go down the rethink phase, which is where the new normal comes into play. So with that, I'll hand it over to Shane to go through the phases in greater detail.
Thanks, Bo. See if I can get my slides to advance. There we go. So for a long time, we've primarily worked in the office. So typically people go into the office, every day or most days of the week, and they do that for a number of reasons. But it was typically because there are a number of resources that were set up in the office that people needed to access as part of their day-to-day jobs. So typically people would have a desk with a number of assets on it. One would be a physical PC, there would be a telephone. They'd leverage physical collaboration spaces like meeting rooms. And then there'd be a number of functions they'd use, whether it were printing documents or contracts for people to interact with, proofread and sign, as well as, standard communication with email, producing and collaborating on those documents, which were typically stored in some form of network file share, as well as other apps and data resources. And if we drill into that PC, it had a number of things on it. So it had an underlying operating system. There were a number of security agents and IT related tooling that was on that device. There was a subset of applications that were either mandated by IT or users had role specific applications that were installed. There was associated data sets that went along with those applications, which were either stored locally on the device or come off some sort of shared network repository. And there were other networks, applications and services. And over time, IT became very good at deploying infrastructure based around that scenario. So they deploy things like SCCM and WSUS to avoid every machine downloading Windows updates and application patches individually to save on internet bandwidth costs. There was the associated security tooling, which got put in place, security event management, antivirus, anti-malware software, appropriate content filters with web proxies and so on. And everything lived behind a firewall to very tightly control communication in and out of the premises, right? There's nothing new here. We've been doing this for the better part of 20 years. So, and if you had Macs or some mobile devices in the environment, you typically might have some other platforms that manage those as well. Now, if you were part of the lucky 10% or less that were either in a sales function or an executive, you were assigned a laptop. Because that was a small number of devices, that device going home didn't pose a massive amount of challenges. But that device still needed to access the same resources without being in the office, as well as IT needed the capability to then secure and push updates to that device. So there were two things that most organizations typically do in those scenarios. So one was to put a VPN in place so the device can function as if it was actually still inside the building. We also found with that scenario, there's associated challenges with making sure that that state's in place and that connection's always there, and what it meant from a single sign-on capability for users and potential differences in how they'd access things. Then there are other applications that didn't lend themselves to working correctly over a VPN. So that either that, or if users didn't have a corporate managed laptop, because laptops are typically more expensive than desktop PCs, or alternatively, because their life cycle is only 2 to 3 years rather than the typical 4 to 6 years, which you sweat a desktop PC over. Virtual desktops were a way of getting those legacy style applications that don't work well over a VPN, or providing an alternate remote access technology in order to work. So we then find ourselves in the current pandemic situation of now everyone has to become one of the 10%, right? So 80+% of people are now working from home. And as part of that respond phase that Bo was talking about earlier, IT basically did what it needed to get it done and get people working, which was we scaled up VDI infrastructure because that was seen as a catch-all to be able to remotely deploy a desktop. We scaled up our VPN concentrators and our firewalls to cope with the additional traffic, and we scaled up our internet bandwidth because rather than 10% of people being, outside, we had 8 times plus the amount of people coming in over that VPN connection. But there was some challenges which a lot of our customers are now dealing with. So for example, there was a security roll up for Windows 1909 last week, a couple of weeks ago, that was about 4 gig in size. And if you're trying to push out things like the new feature update for Windows 10 for 2004, that's over 12 gig of data. And if all of that is coming from your on-premises infrastructure, which when the devices were in the building, it was architected for, it worked, it's a tested and known quantity. We've had organizations which have had to tell their employees, in order to patch over a 6-week period, they rolled through their employee base based off of the first letter of their surname and said, for this weekend, you need to leave your laptop on and connected to the VPN for Saturday and Sunday so that we can patch. So that A, they could actually get the update rolled out, but B, so that it didn't saturate their internet connection and VPN and affect the user experience of everyone else during business hours. We're hearing stories like that all the time. So other challenges like the security tooling, because it's used to having the access to the device across the blue cable inside the premises, VPNs not necessarily being connected all the time gives challenges around security and compliance, actually knowing what the state of the device is if something actually happens. And because that device isn't behind the corporate firewall anymore, it poses additional risks from a security standpoint to those devices. Now, if we start to drill into and look at core capability in the way that functions that users use, in an office-bound scenario, you'd have a phone on a desk. Well, most people nowadays have actually got either a corporate-issued mobile phone, if you're one of the lucky ones, or alternatively, most people have got a mobile phone now with something close to an unlimited call plan on it. So we don't need to offer, traditional telephony services. It's not like people are taking their desk phone home and plugging it into the wall at home. We have heard of some instances of that, but it's pretty few and far between. Then from a meeting and collaboration space, because we can't go into the office because of social distancing and it's hard and we're not able to actually go out and meet people that we're either utilizing our services or purchasing our products as organizations, we started leveraging digital collaboration tools. So a lot of people lent on Teams because it was part of the Office suite, which they're already licensed for. The usage of Zoom is gone through the roof as an alternative to that as well. And at VMware, we actually found it, especially for Bo and myself as technologists, we do a lot of whiteboarding. So using third-party whiteboarding tools like Miro is something that we use internally at VMware. Then from a file access perspective, a lot of people have leveraged OneDrive as part of their Office 365 subscription, as well as other alternatives like Box and Dropbox and things like that out of the cloud to avoid data being pulled out of on-premises file shares. A lot of people are now accelerating their migration to Office 365 hosted emails, a way of moving that data closer to users from an email perspective. And then one of the other challenges is when you can't actually physically pass something from one customer to another, where if you're providing a service, there's a lot of contractual based things that people have to sign. The requirement for printing's gone away, and the ability to leverage other third-party tooling like DocuSign, for example, as a way of transacting sales, for example. We're seeing a massive uptake in that as well. So as far as potential solutions to this, VMware has a platform called Workspace ONE, which has the capability of doing full modern management of devices over the air without coming back on premises. So everything from managing the configuration of the device, deploying operating systems, allowing users to out-of-box devices and enroll them without IT needing to physically be present or even have seen a device, and be able to patch and manage that device through its entire life cycle, the operating system, the firmware, the applications that are deployed, all out of the cloud across the CDN. So other challenges that our customers are coming to us and saying is that, IT assets are great when everything works, but ultimately they break sometimes and users need help. And without the capability of people being able to walk up to an IT service desk with their device and say, I'm having trouble with this, can you help me? They actually need tooling around being able to remotely assist those users as well. So our platform comes with remote control and remote view capability for remote assistance. And it's one platform for all of the devices. So use the same mechanism for a Windows PC, as a Mac, as an Android device, as an iOS device, etc. Then with VMware's recent acquisition of Carbon Black, we've got the capability of deploying next-gen antivirus and EDR capability from the cloud. So removing the need for that on-premises security capability. You may still want to plug it into a SIEM tool on site, but removing the need for access and that VPN in order to gain visibility to what's going on. And with Workspace ONE Intelligence, we've got the capability of then feeding that data into Workspace ONE and creating some powerful security automations to resolve issues as they arise, or isolate a device, or alternatively remotely wipe the device to secure data if something untoward happens. Then as part of the platform as well, we've got a powerful single sign-on and conditional access engine built in. So the capability of allowing passwordless yet secure access to applications and data wherever they reside, be that in the cloud, be that on premises, being able to enforce detailed conditional access policies around what do we know about the state of the device. Is it up to date? Is it patched? Does it have any blacklisted software? Is the antivirus on? Is the firewall on? Is it encrypted? Is it fully compliant with IT security policy? If it isn't, deny access to privileged services and remediate it. If it can't be remediated, integrate with your help desk tool and let security and IT know that there's a problem they need to manually intervene with. We then also have the capability with the Horizon Cloud Service of actually managing virtual desktops both in the cloud and on premises. So fully lifecycling your VDI infrastructure, allowing users to hit a single application portal, and they don't know where these applications are coming from. They're just clicking on what they need to access. They're getting seamless access in, as well as enabling hybrid use cases, like being able to fill up your on-premises infrastructure up to a certain level and then dynamically burst into the cloud. So you're only paying for cloud usage dynamically, or alternatively allowing virtual desktop DR use cases. So not needing two on-premises data centers for a DR use case for your virtual desktop infrastructure. And with the platform, it gives you the capability to deploy all of this and manage all of your devices, as well as your entire end user estate and security estate, all from the cloud very seamlessly. Although for some of our government customers and customers that aren't ready for the cloud, all of these services can be deployed on site as well if you choose. Over to you, Bo.
Excellent. So as you can see, the foundation here is essentially understanding how you can cope or how you can have a solution that is sustainable moving forward. What we're seeing here, as I mentioned before, Dell has done a survey for us, and from what they've gathered from their customer survey is that pre-COVID there's 20%. So obviously VMware was 10% before. That can work from home, and then during the pandemic, obviously the majority of those users are going to be working remotely. Right, and then what we think is that post the pandemic, we're going to see that it's not going to come back to that 20% anymore, or 10% for that matter. VMware is moving to that 50 to 60% users are going to be remotely working, and we're seeing as a customer standard, we're going to see a jump of that, saying that from 20%, it's going to be 40% that is going to be working from home. Now, obviously, as you saw before, more and more services that can be moved to the cloud will enable the users to work from home effectively. Going outside of that boundary to have something on premise will make that transition a lot easier. So embracing that type of concept will build a greater foundation for you to be able to tackle the new normal moving forward. And but in saying that, when you actually do support a remote work culture, what the thing that you would need to be mindful of is making sure that the employee engagement is key. Making sure that the employees can still, even if they're working remotely, even you don't see them face to face, you need to make sure that you have the tool and services in place so that they can still be engaged and do whatever it is that they need to do to be more effective in the workplace. So obviously there's going to be a focus on making on training. How do you actually change the experience of your training platform? In VMware, we're already used to going through webinars and whatnot to actually skill up our sales force and our internal staff as well. There's also the corporate communication. So not a lot of people are going to be in the same place anymore. How do you make sure that you can effectively send out a broadcast to everyone to collaborate, to make sure that they are aware of what is happening out there? There's also a focus on making sure that you're empowering the user. So rather than treating a device, locking it down, making sure that nothing bad happens to it, it's changing the culture, changing the way you approach things, making sure that you trust the user more, and you trust the user that the user knows what they want to actually get. So having this self-service capability or self-service culture is what we want to be able to deliver. And obviously measuring how are they doing, making sure that they can actually provide feedback. And there is a mechanism for feedback to say that they are doing great, they're having the ability to access stuff, or they can't access stuff because things aren't working. So having that feedback loop is very, very important. And finally, obviously, in that sense, it leads to better productivity in the end. So the things I wanted to highlight here is that with the Workspace one, as Shane mentioned before, it is driving that self-service culture. So that ability for users to go into a one place to gain access to all their resources. They have the ability to do that across any device that they want to choose. They have choice over what device they want to actually work with, whether it be corporate issued or whether it be bring your own. So essentially having that one place where users can go into, gain access to the application that they require, receive a notification, receive the ability to search what is happening within their company, look up users and whatnot. So essentially having this one place where users can go into to be effective, to do their job and gain access to the tools that they need to do their jobs. The next part is essentially automation. Ooh, hasn't moved. Yep. The next part is automation. So it's well and good to have things, to set up boundaries, to set up rule sets and whatnot. But in this changing environment, we need to have a system that is adaptable enough to cater for changes. So in this instance, we need to make sure that it is, we have the ability to use the cloud technology or use harness the power of the cloud, its analytics capability to make decisions for you in the background. So things like, all of the devices, if the devices were to be enrolled, they are reporting back in to say that, yes, I'm running, yes, I'm enrolled, yes, we are, and there is nothing wrong with the endpoint. There's also this zero trust secure access, making sure that you're living it to the user, making sure that we know that the user, the person that is trying to access a resource is the actual person, sending out challenges to the user, two-factor authentication. So essentially making it a focus for them to be able to access the resources that they need to, providing that they can prove who they say they are. And obviously having the ability to respond to threats. So as I said, we can actually look at what's happening to the device from a device health perspective, from a patch and so on. However, if there is a threat on that device, we want to make sure that we can respond to it. If there is a detection of a malware or whatever it is, we want to make sure that the system is smart enough to be able to quarantine the device automatically, or make the necessary steps to make sure that that threat is actually removed. Or in terms of the zero trust access, not pertaining to the device, but to the user, in that sense that we can actually go and say, yep, this user is at a higher risk because we're seeing different behaviors. So therefore, let's step up the authentication. Let's do a two-factor authentication just to make sure that the user that's trying to access a resource is who they say they are. So again, all of these things needs to be done in an automated fashion, and that's where the system needs to come in place. Now, from a automation and analytics perspective, we need to also look at things in not a confined way to say that we should do things in one way or the other. As I said before, we need to embrace an open system. So from a Workspace ONE perspective, obviously the choice is up to the user. They can look at I work well with Android. I work better with in an iOS device, Mac OS, Windows 10, whatever platform that they choose. They can use the same platform to access the same resources. But not only that, the applications that they access as well, it needs to be open, not just to the one vendor as well. In that sense, as Shane mentioned, we have, obviously, we use Microsoft 365 for email, sometimes for collaboration. We use Zoom, right, for webinars. We use Miro for whiteboarding. So again, having the ability to have an open ecosystem and adding all of those resources in place allows us to do and respond a lot better. And coming back to an automation perspective, obviously the Carbon Black acquisition allows us to go into that security space. However, in saying that, if you're not going down that path, we can also support other security vendors, things like Cylance, Lookout for your mobile devices, Netscope. So those types of having the ability to have the platform integrate with other things that is available out there would make it will make it so that you are prepared for whatever's going to come in the future. So with that, I think it's I wanted to give you a bit of an idea what VMware is working on. What is this future that we're talking about? Hopefully, Shane, you've already done the thing.
At VMware, we're turning science fiction into enterprise reality. We're helping our customers adopt emerging technologies such as spatial computing. Augmented reality and virtual reality are already being used by our customers today across a variety of industries to dramatically increase productivity and the overall employee and customer experience. And VMware Workspace ONE is making it happen, taking real-world solutions from proof of concept to production. With scalable enterprise management for smart glasses and now augmented and virtual reality devices, Workspace ONE provides streamlined onboarding and configuration and simplified app deployment across any spatial computing device. We're building a future that enables secure access to spatial applications running on any device across any cloud, a platform that can lower the cost and improve the effectiveness of training through virtual reality. A platform that will accelerate workforce productivity through augmented workflows and remote assistance. Join with VMware as we build the future digital workspace now.
Next slide.
At VMware.
All right. So just to, I guess, to summarize what we've, So just to summarize what we talked about before, it is important to understand your new normal. As I said before, there's three personas that we need to think about. Workers that's 100% remote, workers that's needs to actually be in the office, and also those hybrid ones. Understand what is the business requirement. Does it make sense for those users does it make sense to have tools that is more moved to the cloud, so to better cater for this new age that we're going into. So right sizing, rationalizing, and design for robustness, making sure that you lay the foundation would having most of these services in the cloud assist you more, and would harnessing the power of the cloud allows you to be more productive or be more responsive to the new normal in the future, going from a 10% users that's working from home to a 50 to 60%, almost half your fleet. Does it make sense to just expand your current VPN solution, or does it make sense to look at new ways of doing things so that it will actually give you the ability to step into the future and gaining insights, or gaining the capability of harnessing things like automation and analytics, the openness of the application ecosystem that's available out there. Again, those are the main things that we want to cover, that hopefully you got from what we've covered today. So with that, right. So with that, I think we're at the Q&A side. If there are any questions, please type them in, and we will be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Bo. So as Bo said, if you guys haven't submitted a question, you can do so via the question box, and we'll do our best to address them all. I'll give it a few seconds.
Oh, it's Michael here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, look, I'm not sure whether you had the statistics on this, but I'd just be curious to know with those, or what you're seeing anecdotally, how those figures that came out from Dell about, workers migrating to a remote workforce, what the difference was between the different, the different geographies, the major geographies being, say the Americas, APJC and Europe. And again, I don't know if you have that information or if you've heard it anything sort of anecdotally, but I'd be curious to know if that adoption was different in those geos and what may have influenced that at all. Do you have that sort of information?
Not readily. I think from the numbers that was presented before, that was predominantly in the US. However, yep. We are seeing a similar number in our region in Australia and New Zealand. Basically, are looking at those numbers. So 20%. VMware was 10% before. Having the ability to work from home. We're seeing a spike in the pandemic. Basically, everybody needs to work from home, and then after the post-pandemic, we are looking at around the 40% mark of people, wanting to have the ability to work from home as the new normal. Again, VMware is going from a 10% to a projected 50 to 60% of our workers to be able to have the flexibility of working from home.
So I guess if I can build on Bo's answer. So the Australian Financial Review this week released an article that was based off of some research that was done by, I forget the name of the independent organisation, but they surveyed 32,000 workers about return to work and what they wanted to do. So pre-pandemic, there was a very small percentage, and it was very dependent upon industry. Obviously, if you're in retail and it's not online retail, it's very hard to have people work from home. If you work for an airline, you can't necessarily serve beverages to people in a seat from home. So it does depend. But what they're actually seeing is that there's less than 2% of people are saying that they want to work 5 days a week from the office in the Australian market. So it's going to become very prolific. The other thing which has sort of affected it is that if you look internationally, is not everyone has had programs like JobKeeper, where they're actually, even though productivity is down and revenue is down for certain businesses, to necessarily keep people employed in other countries. So that's greatly affected the numbers from country to country, depending on how different governments have responded. As well as in Australia, in the fortunate position where our infection rates are relatively low. So we're going to come out of this potentially a lot faster than, say, our counterparts in the US and in some parts of Europe, for example.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting point, isn't it? There's so many different facets that have contributed to our success here in Australia, and I think that a lot of those will definitely contribute to how quickly we shut down, but also how quickly we come out of it. But I know from a training perspective, and again, happy to share with everyone on this call, we went from a virtual training business, somewhere in the vicinity of 10 or 15% to on a Friday, to switching that over to 100% virtual on a Monday, and it was an appreciably large exercise to undertake. But once the dust settled, it was sort of became fairly normal. So I think a lot of people, a lot of businesses have come to the conclusion that they were quite scared of it. But once it actually happened, you know, the sky didn't fall in, and they're certainly a lot more open to it.
Yeah, and look, I agree with those comments. There are a lot of organisations. I work very heavily in government, so a lot of government departments had the opinion if people weren't in the office, they weren't working. So it's a gross generalisation, but there's pockets of that throughout all industries, and I think what it actually showed, and a lot of the analysts are agreeing with it, is that because people are getting more time at home, they're not spending 3 hours a day getting angry behind the wheel of a car. They're actually becoming more productive. I think some of the stats we had internally is that people are actually getting more exercise than they were before at VMware because they're spending more time actually going for walks with the family and things like that. So there's those aspects to it, as well as, like you said, the sky didn't necessarily fall. But I think when you look at businesses accelerating out of the slump that we're in, the difference is going to be that businesses that are more digitally capable and have the ability to adapt faster and leverage more tooling as a way of differentiating and establish competitive advantage are the ones that are going to accelerate faster out the other side. And that message has been really consistent across most of the analysts, like Gartner, for example, have been very strong in their messaging around some of that. So and when you think about it, right, everyone's now working from home, everyone's using web conferencing tools, the way we present and things is changed. And unless if everyone's doing the same thing, it's very hard to differentiate. So as we use more tooling, new features and functions come into play, the ability to adapt and be able to make use of opportunities when they come along technologically or otherwise is going to make the difference for organizations coming out the other side.
Yeah, look, it's not dissimilar to, I guess, life and evolution in general, isn't it? Those who adapt and overcome and are the most agile are the ones that survive. You know?
Yep, agree.
Survival of the fittest.
Yeah. Back to you,
Thanks for
Michelle.
that great question, Michael. Okay, so we don't have any more questions coming through, so we'll conclude today's session. I'd like to thank everyone for joining the webinar this morning, and a big thank you to our speakers, Shane and Bo. I hope you all have a lovely day. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.